All right. Good afternoon. Happy Sunday. So, yeah, we've got a lot of energies lining up here as we come into July. I've been talking a lot about this on past podcasts and lives. And there is no question we are in a place right now where a lot of things are going to be changing here. And I have to tell you, um, it might be a little bit of a lull before the storm, and let's hope that's not the case. But when I was looking into July, right now we're in the first quarter of the moon as we end, June. Of course, today's the 29th, right? So we're in the first quarter. The full moon will come up July 2nd, right before the 4th. A lot of people are worried about the 4th. And then, of course, we get into the third quarter coming up here near the middle of the month. And that's where it really gets interesting as we start moving into July. I've been talking a lot about Uranus. Uranus is the planet of direct, unusual change, out of the blue stuff. And that's going to be kicking in here really strong as it lines up with the fixed star Alcyon in the Pleiades. And again, that's going to happen right in the middle of the month. But here's the interesting thing about July. In the middle of the month, we got all kinds of stuff going on. We got Uranus conjuncting Alcyon. We have Neptune going retrograde on the 4th of July. We have Saturn going retrograde on the 12th of July. We've got Mercury going retrograde on the 17th of July. And we've also got Uranus conjuncting Alcyon on the 15th. So plain English, from the second week of July, actually from the beginning of July, all the way into the latter part of July, a lot of energies lining up. The biggest one is Mars. Mars is going to conjunct the moon's south node, known as K2, right about the 21st. And interestingly enough, right at the end of that, Mars and the moon break the Kalasarpa Yoga that we've been in since the end of March, right on about the 28th of July. So this is some very, very powerful energies lining up here. Now, what's encouraging to me is it doesn't look like World War III or the end of the world, because we don't have enough of the major outer planets going into hard aspects like Saturn or Pluto, like oppositions and squares and conjunctions like we did in 9/11 and many wars, and also what we had during COVID. We don't have those kind of lineups, but we got a lot of tension here. And again, Russia just kicked off one of the largest drone and missile attacks on Ukraine. I think it was just yesterday or the day before. And a lot of it got thwarted with the electronic warfare and shooting them down, et cetera, et cetera. And again, where's Ukraine getting all these resources? Of course, the United States has been going like this, and so has Europe, just doling out the money. So it's a very interesting scenario, that whole Ukraine-Russia thing. And I think, again, I've mentioned the rabbit hole goes much deeper. They can't find half the money we borrowed them, billions, hundreds of billions of dollars. And also, I've heard the Tucker Carlson was talking about how he runs into people in Switzerland driving around Bugattis and, McLarens and designer suits and on. And they just got cash falling out of their pockets that are Ukrainians. So it's a very mysterious thing, this whole situation that's been going on. And let's hope this can resolve and spill out. I think another area that I see a lot of trouble with is what's going to happen with all this stuff going on with Pam Bondi and Kash Patel. Now, we know they're in there and we know they're doing a lot of things, but I think a lot more is going on with this Biden auto pen thing, and a lot more is going on with the money. Always follow the money, right? It's always about the money. I used to do forensics work back in the late 80s and 90s. And I used to have federal agents that I'd meet with at times to get evidence. It was really kind of cool to see how they think, And he says, Jeff, there's three basic motivations for almost all crimes. He said it's either love, sex, money, or, of course, revenge comes into there too, right? And interesting how he's not wrong. Money and power. We got to add power in there too, right? You could put the love and sex in one category. You could put the money and power in another. And, of course, the revenge in another category. And those are always your major motivators for a lot of things here on the soul cauldron called Earth. I always say we're on the soul cauldron, stuck on spin cycle. And the detergent seems to be the egos and also the free will that we all have. It's all about power and money and materialism. So it's an interesting thing where this is all kind of crescendoing to here. And July is a big trigger coming up. And of course, we got the huge celebration of this country's July 4th. So it's always a big one. And I got to tell you, yeah, the comments are coming through here. I'm watching a lot of people's comments. I got to turn my other monitor on here about how, Biden was a sick joke and on and on. Yeah. And I think we're going to find ultimately this is going to be beyond a joke. I think it's going to get really serious. I know if I was one of the politicians who had my hand in the cookie jar, which is most of them, they're probably going to find they are going to have not an easy time. Again, I had said the Kala chakra, which is, again, that's the wheel of time that I cast for the spring equinox, which is a look-see outlook for this year coming. I think as this year bears on, meaning into the fall, into the latter part of this year, you're going to see a lot of stuff come out that is really going to be interesting. And again, we always hear the media trying to try these cases, but I'm thinking for real, these are going to be tried. Like there might actually be arrests and indictments going on. And that's because of Pam Bondi and Kash Patel and where we're at. And of course, the Supreme Court has been ruling in a lot of favor to this illegal alien removal. And of course, Trump was just on Marita Bartiromo this morning explaining how some of that stuff is really moving in the right direction. And a lot of people are against this. But I got to tell you, it's interesting. If we don't protect America, America ain't going to be here. And this is what I seen in the astrology, is that we're seeing a wave of change. And many pundits and economists are like, oh my God, the economy is going to go to hell in a handbasket. Everything's bad, right? It's always bad. Bad sells, right? But I actually see the opposite. I actually see that these tariffs and the releasement of the energy that has been literally suppressed since the 1800s, and many other things in the manufacturing that's going to be coming in here. We're not seeing it all instantly. We might not be seeing it in our checking accounts right now, but give it time. What I like is I think this is going to be like a big ship turning. And the only reason I say that is because the astrology shows that. We're seeing the United States have what we call primary aspects that are really good. And even though, yeah, it's always a roller coaster ride getting somewhere, and there's always a lot of bumps in the road, right? We're all going like this from the bumps, right? But I would say that overall, the general trajectory of what I see is happening is a about-face turnaround for the United States in general. And Trump was saying that this morning, whether you love him or hate him, and I think he's right about this. And that is that the United States is kind of the de facto pillar with the not only the petrodollar, but the whole economic structures and the way finances are set up here in the West, at least, for the entire world. So this is really a critical time in humanity. And, I've been watching a lot of different pundits say, well, every 250 years, countries go to, hell in a handbasket. And we kind of saw that. I think the country did go into hell in a handbasket. But I also think we're seeing an about-face change that's ultimately in the future. I've got a positive outlook. I really do. And I feel good to be able to say that. And I hope I'm right in my analysis because, I've lived a few minutes, most of us have, but look at the young people, like my son and these grandkids. I was just with a guy last night who was a Marine. He was helping me move some stuff around for my son. And, he just had an 8-year-old little child. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, 8 months old. This child's going to be driving a car in like 2040, and here we are, 2025, right? So, or in the 40s. And, I just am happy. I don't think America will ever be like it was. The past is always the past. But the future, at least if we can maintain this country and its freedoms and keep the structures in place and fortify the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, it's a great place for all of us. I don't care what color you are. I don't care how big, tall, fat, short, what you believe, as long as we can keep this country on track. And I really have to say the astrology shows that's likely to happen. even though what I just espoused a few minutes ago about July, yeah, July is going to definitely, I think, be an intense time. But I also think it's a crescendo moving us in a better direction. So it's really good. So I want to look at a couple of the comments here that are going on here. And yeah, so somebody saying it's going to be an interesting month. Yes, it is. And again, Mars and K2 are very powerful. These only come together about every 2 years. What's the big background energy is the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. And I also want to bring up that every single one of us are going to feel this in different areas of our lives. So not just the whole world scene, which everybody talks about, and I've talked about a lot, but each one of you are going to have the effects of these energies in certain areas of our charts. And I know I've been feeling it. Saturn and Neptune, I was just on the phone with a lady this morning doing an interrogation who is having a lot of issues with pathogens. Wasn't this interesting? Saturn, the planet of structure, conjuncting Neptune. And by the way, I should tell you, Saturn is going to go right up to the conjunction of Neptune by like 12 minutes of arc, right at about July 16th, when all this other stuff is happening. And then Saturn, of course, goes retrograde, or did go retrograde on the 12th, and they separate from each other. See, it's like a relay race up there. When you look at astrology, it's really astronomy. It's truly astronomy. The ancient astrologers always called it astronomy. And that's really what it is. It's the mechanics of the geometry of the positions of the planets to us on Earth, and more importantly, to each one of us as individual beings. And depending on how old you are, and also the configurations that are happening in your chart, the houses that these planets and conjunctions and aspects are happening are quite profound. They're really, really, really profound, I have to say. So all of us are going to be affected in our own completely unique individual ways from this. And some of us might find it's very positive or releasing, and others, depending on the aspects it's making. Again, if you have access to a computer program, a lot of people jump on Astro these days. And of course, I'm doing readings all the time, and I'm always looking at these configurations to a person's birth chart. So amazing. I really think in the future, we're going to see astrology evolve to where it was back in the 1600s and earlier. The villages, there's overwhelming evidence. I have a lot of historical documents that are really cool, that so many people were conversant and familiar with astrology. They would spend a lot of time really more in touch with the celestial movements. And of course, think about life back then. We weren't sitting in front of TV screens, right? We were sitting literally in the nature and environment where we were much more in touch. Think about what life was like prior to incandescent light bulbs. You were pouring oil in a lamp to light your night, or you were going to the candle maker, right, and lighting candles the minute the sun went down. So life was so much different. And I think people were, in a lot of ways, much more in touch with agriculture, the seasons and the cycles of the moon. And, it really varied, but I know the royalty for sure treasured the astronomy and astrology. And the proof of it is there's many documents that prove that the king and the queen and the generals and many of the, what you would say, upper aristocrats were extremely enamored with the cycles and energies of astrology. I'm always amazed when I look back at certain documents where, kings would come and consult the court astrologer, or they would come and consult the local astrologer. Many people might have heard of William Lilly. William Lilly was probably one of the better known later astrologers. He lived in the 1600s. He passed away in, I think, 1680. And this, of course, was before the United States was formed. And he actually had predicted many things. And his book, which is actually called Christian Astrology, was just packed. It's this thick. It's an amazing book. In fact, I might have that book on handy here somewhere. Yeah, here it is right here. This is an incredible book. It's actually called Christian Astrology. Look at the size of this thing. It's huge. And I mean, this has everything in it from here's a great picture. I always show this picture. This is an amazing picture of him. This is, you can probably see it right here. Look at the drawings here. Absolutely an amazing book. This book was actually written, I think, 1647. I think is when it was the first copyright on it was. That was 1659 actually. And this one is actually not as good. It's a great book. I love this book. A lot of stuff in here about a medical astrology, all kinds of stuff in here about cycles, about weather, about how the mundane astrology affects each individual in their own life. Absolutely fascinating. But the farther I go back to, the 800s, the first century forward, stunning astrology. And of course, then you turn the page and jump across the pond over there to, India. And really interesting how so much ancient texts exist. And I absolutely love that, especially as the translations have been done here over the last couple hundred years to see just how far back astrology goes. I mean, some of this stuff was literally penned 3,000 to 5,000 years ago. Some scholars dispute that. I don't. I really think it may even be older than that. And again, back to what is it? It's energy. It's energy on the wash machine called the spin cycle, right? So, and again, the whole principle is we're the spiritual beings in this perception of reality. Some people call it the simulation. By the way, I found something really cool here. There's another book. It's called Simulacra or Simularca or whatever, I don't know how you pronounce it, and Simulation. This was one of the books, not the only book, that actually inspired The Matrix. I couldn't believe it. The Wachowski brothers had cited this as one of their references that they were using in the screenplay. Well, a lot of people think we're in a simulation, right? We look at our lives, we look at the world, the news, and everything that's going on. And of course, many flat earthers, and of course, if you listen to the Tartarians, you go, wow, there's a lot of reality structures here going on. You listen to the people who've had abductions, UFO experiences, possessions, etc. What is this place? What is this planet? And, astrology is one way, I find, to take a different viewpoint, a different angle of looking at your life. And it's certainly not the only one. I love psychology. I love physics and hard sciences and the so-called esoteric stuff. I love both sides. And what's fascinating about all of this is clearly we're all just sojourners here for a very short amount of time. And there's no question you and I are going to take the pipe sooner or later. That's my expression for dying, right? Sooner or later, we're all out of here. But what do we take with us? Well, we ain't taking these clothes. We ain't taking the possessions. We're not taking our money and all the other stuff. And yes, we want to protect our loved ones so they don't have to pay for shoveling dirt over us or cremating us or whatever else they do with us after we pass away. And I certainly do respect honoring a person's life or an animal's life when they die. It's really great to remember who they were and what they did and appreciate their good points and on and on. But really, when we get out of here, the only thing we get is the consciousness we form. And I talk a lot about this. The lower conscious mind is really the steering wheel of the gas pedal and the brakes. It's not us, even though it feels like us. We got our health, we got our situations, we all got our financial lives, our personal lives, our physical lives, etc. And our associations with whoever we have as far as family and friends and close ones and jobs and what have you. But it's not us. And sometimes to, I think, back out and keep a little more sane in this cauldron of insanity is to realize that, and again, to just back out. Like, again, I always say, if you can go for a walk in nature, whatever it takes, whatever you do to stay centered and sane, it's really important to remember that. My expression is, it ain't that deep. In other words, if we get so emotionally responsive to all the crazy stuff that's battering us constantly, the news, the people, the situations, everything else. I know I just had Mars conjuncting my Pluto yesterday. And it's so interesting. I can sit here and do this podcast and talk about this, right? But yesterday morning I got up, I was all fired up and angry. And I'm like, because, I'd lost some very important things that I had misplaced. And then, I reacted really heavy. And then it's so interesting. Right after I got done, I looked and I went, oh my God, I have Mars conjuncting my Pluto. And that happens to all of us every 2 years. And it'll be a little different for all of us. But I was so reactive. And so no matter how much, we try and be objective and removed and stoic, it's very hard not to be. And, that's why we all got to be a little nicer to ourselves and be a little more easy on ourselves. We're all just human beings having a physical experience and, or spiritual beings having a physical experience. And none of us are perfect, and we ain't never gonna be. And that's why I think it's really important to just back out once in a while and say, you know what? Hey, I was stupid, right? Or I got emotional or what have you. But if we don't have those moments where we back out and take it up to 100,000 feet or 50,000 feet or whatever you want to use as an analogy and take that kind of overall viewpoint of where you're at, you can go crazy. This world can drive us all crazy. And, as kind of an apropos thing to bring up with what we have coming up here over the next month. It doesn't mean, the world's going to end, World War III, the end of the world. I've been hearing that stuff since the day I drew breath. The world's always ending, right? Well, everyone's world will end. But I think the world itself is going to keep right on going, as it always does, And I always mention, I think it was 1977. I had a friend of mine, he owned a theater, right? So Jeff, you got to come with me. You got to see this movie. It's called The Late Great Planet Earth. And it was narrated by Orson Welles. And, most people know who he is, right? Citizen Kane. And he did so many great movies, Lady from Shanghai and on and on. And Orson Welles was actually born in the same town I was born in, Kenosha, Wisconsin. He always denied it, but he was. And what's interesting about that is, he was, had his thunderous voice. Oh, the world's going to end, Nostradamus. He was doing the Nostradamus predictions. And he said that literally the world was going to end by 1985. Axis tipped, 1,000 miles an hour winds, nuclear holocaust, you name it. Fear, fear, fear. That's what sells, right? That's what drives the news, fear. So what's interesting is none of it happened. And I remember walking out of the theater and I went, God, if this movie's right, we're screwed, I felt like Blowfish, let's go have some fun, because, the world's going to end, but it never did. And I never lived like that anyhow. I don't care. You got to somehow take things more in stride as the best you can, or you go cuckoo. So anyways, I'm looking at a lot of the comments here, and a lot of people are coming in here. So yeah. Somebody's mentioning here how digital ID will be coming on the radar screen soon. You bet. AI, digital ID, the government watching us. If you own an iPhone, I can promise you, beyond a reasonable doubt, they can. I don't know if you know this, but they can actually turn on an iPhone and listen. You need some pretty sophisticated equipment to do it, I hear, but you can do that. I know I was working again in forensics work. I wasn't in the field I was just doing analysis for testifying in court. And, but I had seen some of the toys that the feds had back then. And this is, going on close to 40 years ago. This is like 38, 39, 40 years ago. And literally they could shine lasers on windows and hear everything you're saying in the house. Now I hear your TV can be reversed. Your cell phone can be listened to. You need some pretty sophisticated, clearances to get in to do that stuff, but they can do it. And as long as your phone's on. And some say it can happen with it off. And again, here's the electronics produced in China. So interesting stuff. But, you got to be careful too. You can't live in paranoia, and I don't care. They can listen to whatever I got to say. I got nothing to hide. But, it can get so bad that you can't watch football because when they're in a huddle, you're going to think they're talking about you, So you got to watch your paranoia on this. But, the bottom line is at least the most sovereign place is right here inside of our ears. And it won't be long. They'll figure out how to get in there too. But in fact, they say your face is like reading your mind, right? You can see, a person's mind, when their facial physiognomy. So it's a lot of stuff. But, I overall am optimistic about the world. One of the things that is really cool, these are called the yugas. And it's very interesting. There's another diagram that I have that actually shows the 24 to 26,000 year cycle that our solar system is believed to go around. Now, I know the flat earthers debunk this, but we really do seem to have these huge cycles about every, uh, 24,000 to 26,000 years. And we get to the galactic center somewhere around 11,580. Now, I know this says BC here. I'll show you the other diagram here. If I go to a share screen, stick with me for a minute, and we share the entire screen. I have a diagram here that I'll show you that's pretty cool. It's not perfect, but it gives you an idea of what I'm talking about. And these, yeah, here it is. These are the ages. And you can see here, this is, again, not drawn perfectly to scale, but in general, they tend to say, whoever they is, about every 26,000 years. Now, some people say, oh, it's not 26, it's 25,700 years. Other people say, no, it's 25,900 years. Whatever it is, it's clearly a long, long time, a lot longer than you and I are going to live. And we go around this central sun, meaning our solar system goes around the central sun. Well, it's interesting. We fell in the sewer right around 3000 BC. And that's also where the cuneiform tablets and many other writings began to show up. And they said before that, we may not have needed to write. And then, of course, we descended down into the so-called Iron Age, right, which was pretty much from 700 BC to 400, maybe 500 AD. Then we started marching up into the middle so-called ages, or the Bronze Age. And if you look back, it's nothing but war and war and war. It's all pockmarked by war. And now we're ascending after the industrial revolution into an age that I think is exceedingly high tech. And I think 2020 marked the beginning of that. I really do. We had a Saturn-Jupiter conjunction. That was a 240-year conjunction that is going to usher us into when we truly do get into the age of Aquarius, which I think is going to be right around when the Hebrew calendar runs out, give or take. It's going to be right about that time. The best I can, recollect. And I can tell you, no one knows. I don't know. No one knows 100%. There's a lot of theories out there, but things from what I've seen and can tell by the astronomy, I think it's probably going to be somewhat close to that. And then we ascend into this so-called Silver Age, which I think we're going to go through so much with robotics and AI and computerization, and more than that, technologies that we haven't even thought of yet. In fact, Nostradamus did see this. He actually saw that we would become almost godlike in our ability to manipulate the physical plane. Though I don't think we'll ever get godlike until we get out of these bodies. But anyways, we keep ascending. And by the time we get to the so-called galactic center, which is going to be somewhere around 11,500 AD, or you can see how the math works out here, we actually have full command of the evil spirits. And I think that's really why Tartaria and all these very interesting things showed up. And, no matter how advanced we get in the physical world, we are always still going to be what I like to call spiritual beings having a physical experience. And the more we get knowledgeable that the conscious mind we're thinking with is really below this big, thick dashed line. And Saturn is really the gatekeeper out of this dimension, if you will. In fact, the Greeks actually called Saturn Kronos, the god of time. If you look at its glyph, look at it, it's the cross, previously concretized beliefs, habit patterns, and most importantly, karmas, grounding out through the crescent of the moon. Saturn literally is the bondage of the karma that we're all in, that is connected to our soul roots. Really deep stuff and pretty cool. You can actually see this diagram says it. The soul's bondage to these incarnations. A little bit small on the screen here, but that's really what it is. And it's not just our own karmas. They say we are attached by lines, like silver lines of cords, if you will. That's one analogy, but I think it's much deeper than that. We are literally attached through psychic, etheric attachments to our soul roots, which isn't just mommy and daddy. It's also the lineages of interaction that we've had, which is marriages, you know, offspring, children, also people we meet, encounter, past lives, etc. It's a lot of deep stuff. It's way beyond what any astrologer, any psychic, or anyone is ever going to fully fathom. And I can definitely include myself in that one for sure. And what's interesting about the magic of the way Vedic astrology or Jyotisha looks at things is it's really like drawing a big funnel down into each one of our own personal lives and saying, this is an interactive consciousness that the celestial matrix is interacting with in time. And that's the key. Time. Time is the most interesting thing to me because I really believe God created time, so everything wouldn't happen at once. I really do. Time is such a mystical thing, and it's such a relative thing. Many physicists and quantum physicists grapple with the art of time. And you think about time, it's so interesting. What the heck is time? Time is really a phenomena of perception. Why? When all of us were tied into these meat suits known as bodies on this little thing called Earth, whether you treat it as flat or round, I don't care. The bottom line is we all can say one thing. Every day we see that sun come over the horizon. Every day we see it peak, and every day we see it set, and every night it's at midnight, right? So you cannot deny time, and time waits for no one. Every single thing is marching forward in time. You cannot change time. You cannot change the past. Time is one of the most interesting, divine, magical elements of existence that you can actually think about. And just think about time. You know, I mean, literally, they say you're about 1 billion seconds old at 40 years old, just a little over 1 billion seconds. At 80 years old, you're just a couple billion seconds old. What is time? Well, time is all divisible by sunrise, noon, sunset, midnight, and the cycles of the days around the sun and the seasons, and also the lunations, which is the moon around the earth, which is usually about 27 to 28 and a half days. And it's so powerful. And nobody seems to notice, nobody seems to care as we all go on in our individual perceptions of reality. This is why it is so fascinating to me to just look at astrology every day. It's actually a blessing when I do all these readings because I get to look at time relative to the individual's interaction in perception of reality. You know, every day we look in the mirror, we grow a little older, right? And then just like the song from Pink Floyd, 10 years gets behind us. We wondered, why did we miss the starting gun, right? Or 20 or 30 or 40 years gets behind us, right? Or 50. So, and we look in the mirror, you know, it's interesting. I've heard people say, I can't believe I'm 80 years old or 70 or 60 or whatever. We all say that, don't we? And, you know, time is such a perception of reality. And, you know, that's why I love this diagram, because this down here is the lower conscious mind. All your psychologists, I have so many great conversations with psychiatrists and psychologists about this. The moon in Vedic astrology is our emotional perception of reality. Think about that whole concept there. Let me bring this in a little bit and I'll move this up. You can see here, that's what I drew here. And I kind of extracted this diagram. You won't find this diagram on the internet. A lot of people ask me, where'd you get this diagram? Well, I actually put this all together from some really cool eclectic sources. And you can see here, the moon is our emotional perception of reality. It's the steering wheel, the gas pedal, and the brakes. Or if you will, it's the keyboard, the mouse, and the screen. Whatever analogy you want to use, it's connected to our incredibly complex bodies, right? Our hearing, our sight, our taste, our smell, and our balance, all this stuff. It's so amazing how the mind is really developed right when we exit mom's womb. And it's continuously cramming information. It's like Pac-Man. We're just constantly cramming information from the day we draw breath to the day we exit and stop drawing breath. And we always take logic and intellect we emotionalize it. You see, we always emotionalize everything, no matter how stoic you are, no matter how, center we try to be, we always emotionalize it. It's just what we do, it's how we work. This is why AI will never, ever, ever be like you and I. I got a really cool conversation I think it was about a week ago. I had someone sit down, AI is going to know everything. It's going to solve all the world's problems, going to know everything. I said, oh, yeah? I said, well, when AI starts making babies and creating from stardust, the magic that forms in the womb of a woman or an animal or in the womb of the earth with agriculture, then let me know. Then let me know. And when AI makes the sun rise and keeps the earth spinning every day, or if you're a flat earther, the cycles at least, pretty amazing. So, AI creation, and the Vedas talk about this creation, divinity, God, whatever you want to say, has built in to this entire creational matrix. This one alone, I think there's infinitely complex other matrices, meaning other solar systems, other planets, other places, galaxies, etc. You'd be crazy not to think that's possible. And the bottom line is it's built into creation, the fail-safes that creation always keeps going, even when destruction happens. We see wars, we see destruction, we see death, we see birth, but creation never stops. It's literally the rain that keeps falling of souls into creation. So amazing. And astrology is the matrix that interacts with each one of us, completely individual. And it really does. It's quite amazing. So, yeah. So anyway, I'm going to look at a couple comments here. Here's one. It says, I just turned 2,915 days old. That cool. See, again, look at this reference to time. Time is one of the most interesting things to just stop and just fathom. What is time? Time never stops. It's interesting. When you look at buildings that are old, 100 years old or 500 years old or 1,000 years old, and you look back in time, we look at history. I love watching Turner Classic Movies. I see those old phones, the dial phones. I remember dial phones, when I was, God, I mean, I didn't get rid of I don't think the push button phones came in until I was in my mid 20s, or early 20s. So, before that, it was this, right? And before that, it was, telegram, and before that, it was smoke signals, right? Or you sent the king sent the messenger, sealed the message with wax so nobody could open it up and look at it, right? And then, the guy trotted on the horse. That's where Mercury came from. So you look back at time and, the evolution of society and the cycles that we're all in. It's really, really quite bizarre. So, anyways, so somebody's saying here that there's a super chat above, and I don't know how to get to that. Let me see if I open that up. I don't know how to get to super chats. Can you please read above? Cosmero Audio. Let me see if I can get to this person's thing here. I don't know. I don't even know what a super chat is. Sorry. That's why I need to get Ella back on here sooner or later. She's been really busy. She's been doing a lot of help for me, editing and so on and so forth. She's been really busy. But, here it is. Let's see here. Hide. Elon and Trump will be friends again. He's asking, will Elon and Trump be friends again? Well, that's a really good question. I don't know. That's a good question. Well, I could cast a quickie car wash chart here on that. Let me do that. You can see I'm looking up at my screen here, and let's do that. Let's just see here. You got to bear with me a minute here. It's possible. I think what's going on is Elon is very upset with how Washington works. Washington is so mired in the printing press of money. I think it's pretty wild. Here, let me cast this here. Will Elon and Trump be friends? So, I'm not so sure that they're still not friends. I think he's just Elon. I think Elon shrieked in horror when he saw the thievery that goes on in politics. I think it was Harry Truman said it best. I heard him quoting that on an old clip. He said, if you're a politician, you're not going to make much money. He said, if you do, you're crooked. So, and I think he's right. But, and I think Musk saw that, and Trump is operating in this sewage, of insanity, but it's a system that's functioning. I'm not defending Trump, but I think that's partly what's going on. And Elon's over here going, wait a minute, you couldn't run a business like this. And yet Trump's over here going, yeah, but I got to, So let me just see. Trump is the 10th house. Yeah. Shows they're going to continue to not get along on the issues. That's what it shows. So I'm casting this chart. And the reason why is the moon just separated from a good aspect of Jupiter, and it's now applying to a conjunction of Mars. Well, you don't need to know much about astrology to know Moon and Mars is like throwing matches over an open can of gasoline. It's just not a good aspect. So the answer seems to be no. It's going to not right away. And again, I think this is not so much personal as it is Trump. I would say Musk really has seen the insanity of the District of Criminals, which is also known as Washington, D.C. I call it District of Criminals. And I think it is. I think there's so much corruption. I think there's so much insanity and backdoor, stuff going on. When you look at these politicians, look at Nancy Neurosis. I mean, she's filthy rich. All these politicians, look at Mike Pence. He gets on the news and Mr. Snow White. And yet all these politicians are making maybe 150, 200 grand a year. I think the president only makes 350,000 a year in terms of a salary. And Trump says he donates it. He doesn't even take it. He's lucky because he's a billionaire to begin with. But, it's interesting how these politicians who don't make much money end up being filthy multi-millionaire rich by the time, this usually way before they get out of office. But yeah, so I have to say, my friend, that was a good question. And it doesn't look like they're going to be, clinking glasses anytime soon. So yeah, I would tend to say the answer seems to be no. Let me look at a few other questions here. And I can only tell you what the chart says. That's the magic of interrogation astrology. I do that every day. Interrogation in Prashna, for anybody listening who's not familiar, is asking a question, literally asking a question. And if you think about the magic of that, the entire cosmos is interacting with you when you cast a chart and ask a question. Out of billions of people on the planet, the minute you cast a chart with your conscious question at the location that the astrologer's at, you cast a chart. Now, there's varied opinions. In Vedic astrology, they actually cast the chart where the querent is at. In the medieval astrology, the Western stuff, we cast it right where the astrologer's at. And I do both. And the techniques of analysis, because I've had a lot of astrologers say, well, Jeff, how can you use tropical astrology in interrogation and horary and prashna in the Vedic? Well, you got to bend your mind around. You have to use the techniques in the, medieval tropical, and you have to use the techniques in prashna. And you literally have to become Sybil. And I do that kind of well. It scares me. But we'll focus on the techniques only in tropical astrology and the techniques only adherent in the Vedic astrology. And it's quite interesting when you compare the results, because the bottom line is we want to know, what does it say, right? And in this case, I can tell you on Trump and Musk, ain't looking too good. I think Trump is seeing how Trump is just moving forward. And I think he is. This is my opinion. Trump is saying, okay, yeah, we got a lot of stuff that's going on that isn't perfect, but we need to get the tax breaks. We need to keep the country moving. We can't go into chaos. And it's better. I actually listened to Trump this morning, not that I'm defending him, but he made a good point. Maria Bartiromo said, well, Trump, what are you going to do with the $7 trillion that, you got to roll over? He said, I'm going to roll it over. He said, what else can I do? He said, we're just going to roll it over and defer the debt and keep marching forward as we build. And I think Trump is a businessman. Joe Rogan said the same thing. And if you watch Trump, he's not the greatest orator in the world, but he's really smart. I don't care. And that's going to really get me hate mail. But my opinion is a 79-year-old who can assess and answer questions at the speed and rate he does. I'm telling you, he's not a stupid man. He's a very intelligent man. His orator skills, yeah, okay. He's not like Ronald Reagan and a lot of these other, official presidents. He's not an official president. He's Trump. And he is who he is, and he's got Mars in the ascendant, but he's a businessman. And I was actually surprised at Joe Rogan's, mercurial ability to assess that. Because I remember Rogan's like that. He's real sharp. He comes back with, he's a businessman. And he is. He's totally a businessman. If you really study Trump, he's all about how do we make more money? It's all he talks about. He wants to stop war and make more money. What's wrong with that? In this physical world, as long as we're in a capitalistic society and not a communistic society, which is what they like to call socialism, you got to have money. You got to make money. And that, I think, is what, created the entrepreneurship and the magic that America has. And that is all people are free to create their own visions, their own jobs, their own free will, and set goals. That inspires the human spirit. That is what the essence of it is all, I hear it all the time. I want to be this. I want to be that. Well, we all want to be something, right? If you didn't have the spirit to get out of bed in the morning and have a goal or something to achieve, you'd dry up and shrivel away. You see, so, capitalism, for all its shortcomings, it really aligns with the free will of the human spirit in a lot of ways. Not that I'm here, getting into politics, but it does. And proof of that is I talk to people who come from Tehran all the time, people who come from Russia, people who come from communistic places, and they said it was hell. The government told us what we could be, where to live, how much money we get every month, and it was not good. What food we got to have, So America, for all its shortcomings, why does everybody want to come here? Why does the borders get flooded in the past, and everybody's trying to beat the door down and get in here? Well, because it is a place of opportunity. They tried to destroy it and put communism in, and they're still trying, and they won't stop trying. I can tell you that ever. That's one thing I agree with on the founding fathers. And Ronald Reagan, whether you liked him or not, he actually said it best. He said, freedom is not free. You always have to keep fighting to keep the freedom. And no, this country's not perfect. There's been a lot of injustices and a lot of stuff that happens. The legal system is the finest system money can buy, though sometimes I've seen it be really good, depending on the judge you get and the situations. But overall, this is still the best place to live. Pay your taxes and do what you got to do, because you still have freedom here. And when, we're all screaming and hollering about the country a lot of times, right? And life, but go live somewhere else. You look at the poverty these poor people live in. You just go to Mexico, go to, some other foreign country that's really depressed, and you'll be glad when you come back to America. You jump off the plane and go, I know, I've done it. And it's fun to go to foreign places. But there's nothing like America. It's infrastructure, it's roads. Even though California's governor has let them go to hell, it's still an amazing place to live. I love the freeway systems out here. It's fun. As long as you're on a motorcycle, you can get somewhere. But if you're not, you're going to sit in traffic and stare at taillights. But yeah, it's this goes back to this whole thing. I think Musk, in the interrogation this person asked, is probably got his hair standing on end from the insanity he saw with Doge and the thievery. And they busted a lot of it. USAID was actually funding the communism that was destroying the country, and we were paying for it. And that's a fact. If you look into the facts, a lot of people will get hate mail. Oh, he's wrong. But, that's what it seems to be when I look at things. That's my perception of it. So anyways, the chart shows Elon is one pissed off wet hen right now. He's really mad, and probably not without some justification. Not that I'm defending Elon Musk either, but I think, he's probably right. When you jump in the sewer and you see just how bad it is and why it smells that way, it's not very pleasant. And I think, this is why I made the prediction at the beginning of this year. If the Kala chakra system is right, you're going to see unprecedented prosecutions start not finish, start this year, particularly in fall through forward. And I think a lot of these criminals who created all these networks of holding companies and trusts and everything else, who have been stealing money, they're going to get caught. And you're going to see some interesting things. It's going to be like Clint Eastwood's movie, Hang 'em High, right? Popcorn and candy for the kiddies while they hang them in the town square. So it's going to be pretty crazy, I think, when we start seeing where this all goes. And again, there's a lot of pushback on ICE and everything else. And I don't see that stopping. And I think this is going to keep moving forward. And the media is such a powerhouse on this. I put this on the screen. This is something that was called the Smith Month Act. And I've mentioned this many, many times. It was actually instituted, I think, in 1948 by Harry Truman. And it basically was to require media to have substantiated sources on what they report, not propaganda. Well, Obama remove that. And, clearly, when forget which president was, Bush, Clinton's, Obama, they were all the same cloth. So was Biden. They were all owned by the same, handlers. So, indirectly or directly, right? So, we're in an interesting time right now. And whether you love Trump or hate Trump, I can tell you the astrology says we are going to see unprecedented changes, probably more so than we've ever seen in the history of this country when this 4 years is up. It's going to be pretty intense, which I have to say looks like in a good way. So I got to watch my time here. I can't stay too longer than an hour today, but yeah, a lot of great comments here. Thanks everybody for your comments. And somebody says, that's right. A person said here, the sun actually doesn't set or rise. You're exactly right. It doesn't. It's just there. If you're a round earther, we're rotating. If you're a flat earther, it's the system going around. The sun isn't doing anything. It is doing something. If you're an astronomical person, the sun is believed to go around a central sun about every 26,000 years, 25,009, 25,700 years, whatever one you want to pick apart here. But yeah, everything is moving. In fact, this is why I love the Kala chakra dosha. And that's because Kala is time, chakra is wheel. It's the infinite figure 8 of time. No one ever really questions where that comes from. And I thought it was really amazing when I started cracking into the mysteries of the Vedic astrology Kala chakra dosha system. Most Vedic astrologers don't know anything about it, and I can see why. It's really complex. It's a whole nother world of analysis of time, because all of us will be going forward at certain parts of our life and we leap backwards. And there's a lot of theories on this, but it's believed certain karmas release and go forward. It's like this push-pull of free will and karmas releasing and coming onto the soul. Really deep stuff. Beyond, I think, what any astrologer will fully understand, because this is really the code of angels. And it really is. Astrology or astronomy is not just a bunch of planets and aspects and signs and all that stuff. And no matter how smart we think we are, because everybody's out there espousing all their complex, I know everything. No, you don't. And neither will I. We ain't smart enough to figure out the complexities of the celestial matrix that's interacting upon the soul. It is so profound. It is really, really the code of angels. And I think the mysteries that the soul is attached to is far, far beyond astrology, astronomy, whatever else you want to say, whether it's Vedic or tropical, doesn't matter. That's the interconnecting couplers or portals, if you will, that are interacting with us in what we call time. Time is such an interesting thing, isn't it? And, I always mention the Magus Astrovolos and Dr. Carl Wickland's work. I also mentioned Dr. Edith Fiore, who is wonderful. She was a psychologist, and Dr. Fry. Those are just a few of so many different texts, the Sharia Gilgam, that all make us realize nobody dies. Why are these practitioners and psychiatrists talking to people on the other side? Dr. Carl Wicklund validated hundreds of times. People said, well, I used to be a roofer, and then my name was such and such, and he'd run back and check in the records, and some roofer or guy owned a, whatever, profession it was, just died that many days, weeks, months, years ago. And there's no time. Once we exit these bodies in the astral planes, the astral worlds, there's no time. What is time? Time is an astronomical clock that's relative to the matrix of this sun, earth, celestial matrix, if you will. You see what I mean? It's not, we're in a simulacrum. We are literally in a, you could say, divine soul cauldron of time that's based on the astronomy or astrology that we're all experiencing. And we all experience that consistently. We just all experience it completely uniquely and individually. So it's very divine. And again, if you take a higher source, a God, whatever, out of the equation, you're going to miss the boat. That's why I'm not that afraid of AI. Yes, AI is something to be afraid of and be aware of. And it's also something that can really greatly aid humanity if it's kept in check. But I'm not worried about it, because creation will always keep creating. And divinity is far above anything we're going to figure out. If it wasn't, you and I wouldn't be drawing breath. If you think about that, literally, no one stops to think about, what is your stomach doing right now? Digesting the food we just ate a little while ago, your blood pressure, right? All this stuff, the immune system. Nobody thinks about that. I don't think about it. Just imagine what kind of a computer it would take to keep these incredible bodies alive every single day. Just think about what that would take, let alone even the code to program it. We're not even smart enough to figure that out. Your white blood cells, your red, all this stuff, all the doctors they're very smart. They know a lot about the body, but they don't even understand what some of the glands do in your body. When your emotions are positive, you release interleukins and magical things. Joy really creates powerful emotions. So amazing. Here's another one I wanted to talk about. Our media beating us over the head every day here. Mommy, why won't the mainstream media talk about the Biden's criminal activities? Because they're criminals too, dear. So I figured I'd throw that out when my camera went out. But it's a big picture show. And literally, it's a serious little place. That's why I always love that little cartoon. I used to watch this when I was a kid. Remember this?
Time for this one to come home.
And of course, Mr. Wizard would bring the little turtle out of his crazy life and talk to him and then send it back into another one, right? So it's kind of like these incarnations. Not that we shouldn't take everything here seriously, but sometimes we take it too seriously, we go crazy, right? So with that, I'm going to say bye-bye. I got to run here. I got other appointments to go through. But, thank you, everyone, for your really kind comments. I'm sure I'll get somebody that hates me for saying something good about Trump, and I'm not just here doing that. I'm trying to make an objective analysis of what does the astrology say, and final note on that one. I don't care who would have been in office. The United States had Neptune squaring Mars from 2020 to 2023. It was the twilight zone. So, and I don't think Biden was in office anyhow. I think he was held up in front of us to think he was the president. And we're finding that out, the auto pen and all that stuff, and John F. Kennedy said the same. JFK said that. I remember him standing at the podium. He said, I think the office of the presidency was used for something other than what it was intended for. What was that riddle all about? Well, that means that there are people, call it deep state, swamp, whatever you want, or better yet, how about the owners at the top of the pyramid who are doing this, borrowing all this money, keeping this whole charade going? Probably why Elon Musk isn't 100% wrong when he says, hey, this is insane. Well, he's probably right. And in some defense of what Trump's trying to do, I think Trump is a businessman. He's just trying to keep it going. Let's just keep the train going. We'll throw the bad eggs off as we keep going. We'll get the rotten apples out of the barrel as we go down the track. And, in some ways, that's good because if this bill doesn't pass, we are probably going to see taxes through the roof. It'll be like living in California, which our gas is going to go to 67 cents more a gallon July 1st. I'm looking forward to that. And then the clown shut down all of the refineries here, which there wasn't many, two big ones. And our fuel prices are going to go through the roof. So it's going to be very interesting to see Gavin Newsom's future. If we don't get paper ballots, get rid of those voting machines and voter ID, you'll never see an honest election in the state of California ever. And I always felt that way. So I think it's coming, though, folks. I think a lot of good things are coming. So everybody have a great week. And I think the 4th of July is coming right up here, isn't it? Yeah, it's. I think the 4th is going to be here on. Well, that's next week. Yeah, so we're good here. Yeah, actually, no, the 4th is going to be this Friday. So I'll be talking to you on Wednesday, and if everybody stay safe and be well and hang in there. And just remember, it's all a big picture show. You're in the soul cauldron, stuck on spin cycle, and remember, it's the ego and the free will that's the detergent washing us all out. So. Many blessings. Have a good weekend and first part of your week. I'll see you Wednesday.